Hey guys, welcome back to Black Desert. I'm your host, Tackle the Cyclone here, and welcome back to New Player Blitz. And this time we're gonna go about gear. Probably something that everybody always asks, like, what kind of gear should I have? First off, I'm just gonna go with an explanation of how my journey went about through the course of Black Desert or whatever. Obviously, a lot has changed since release. So what happened with me was I started with like Zereth armor or whatever, and then I eventually went into Rocaba armor. I actually never used Grunil armor. I only went with Rocaba armor simply because I could siphon it out of the NPC here in Valencia named Alpha. Done it in the past, shown it in videos in the past, done it on stream. That was my go-to armor when I was a newbie. Now, as the game progressed, obviously you do want probably boss level gear that is golden. Anything that is gold named is pretty much best in slot, or however you want to determine it. While that's not necessarily something you need to have right away, or if you I don't know why a lot of people drive themselves into this corner or tunnel thinking like, you know, I have to have this or I'm just completely like worthless and useless. It really isn't, because by the time I got to soft cap gear and I went to PvP, I'm still getting vaporized by about like 10-12 people, or like, you know, just 3-4 individuals as well. So really, it feels like defense doesn't really even matter. For all I care, you could probably just wear a reblast shirt into war and just be like, who cares? Because I'm gonna die in like 1 or 2 hits anyways, so who cares? What's the fucking point? That's kind of the mentality of where it got to by the time I hit soft cap and I went to PvP. And I'm either running into people that it's like, the fights are very lopsided. It's very, very infrequent, or very rarely is it ever in the middle ground where you're trading hits and there is counterplay. It's most of the time, even before the CC changes, it was just you get caught in a CC and you just fucking die, and that's it. By the hands of, like, you know, 3,000 hyenas or something, or just not at all. Or either that you're just completely invulnerable and you don't die to anything. So it's just like there's seldom a middle ground that I've experienced in all sorts of wars I've been in. I'm not a fan of Siege. I've never really been to Siege, so my experiences kind of cap out there, because one, I don't really see the point in becoming part of a Zerg ball, and you either get eaten by the Zerg ball, or you're a Zerg ball that just gets eaten by a bigger Zerg ball. Or whichever Zerg ball is more geared, who knows. And then half the time it's like there's so many people on the screen, it unrenders. Obviously Node Wars has changed in that scene a bit now. Siege is a bit different because it's only one-on-one castle. It used to be just, you know, a big ton of alliances and whatever. That's mostly what, just like in terms of an introduction, because obviously your gear is going to be going towards combat, and I assume it's mostly towards PvP. If it's for PvE, there's not too much of anything to worry about. The only thing you really want in terms of PvE is you do want defense, actually, so you don't get one-shotted by the mobs. But then again, if you have a Kudum offhand is definitely preferred if you're going to go grind. Kudum itself has a lot of extra damage against monsters. If you've done any research at all, there's a lot of people outside arguing, or even within the game arguing between Nuver and Kudum, like which one's better and whatnot. I'll say that there's really no difference that you'll see other than until you reach like 260 AP with a Nuver. And with a Kudum is ultimately better for 90% of your journey up until you hit like 260 AP. And then by the time you hit, like, if you ever hit like 280 AP kind of thing with Nuver, Kudum is actually better again. It swaps over. I gotta explain that because that doesn't really make too much sense. It has to do with the renown score here. At a certain point, when you have so much AP, this scaling and bonus level will cap out. And at that point, Nuver itself loses its efficacy. So by the time you hit like super extreme levels of AP, lowering that AP back down for Kudum, where you get those bonus extra DP stats and the accuracy and the ignore res and the bonus monster damage, actually is more beneficial than the Nuver. But there's like this threshold where at about, I'm going to say about 260 AP, because I've grinded with 254, I've grinded with 257, and I don't really see much of a difference other than I get destroyed by monsters much faster with a Nuver than I do with a Kudum, simply because Kudum has defense stats, about 40 extra evasion and 2 extra damage reduction. Here, this is, or it would be 1 extra damage reduction since my Nuver is down one enhanced level compared to my Kudum. And Kudum itself has its bonus accuracy as well, so you also hit the mobs harder. Ignore resistance plus 10%, meaning you get to CC mobs more often. So that means you also do bonus damage because you CC them, and you're either going to do down attack or air attacks. Hopefully the mob can be CC'd. If you're grinding in places like Hystria, that's not really possible, but that defense stat definitely helps against like a bunch of group of mobs just, you know, slamming you all at once, and you might actually get one-shotted. It happens to me sometimes, even in Aakman at 303 DP, fully buffed with PvE buffs. So you know, in terms of the threshold of defense, you do need like 300 something, or like almost 320 if you want to grind comfortably and brainlessly. Otherwise, you're gonna have to watch your health bar. You're gonna have to watch what the enemies are doing, and you might get destroyed. And at the level that you grind at that pace, at that part of the game, is very dangerous. Your risk of losses is very high. Especially with the crystals that I have in my offhands here. The Voltar crystal is very expensive. It's about 30 million each. Awakened Spirit crystal, about 21 million each. So the thing I would suggest, like for newbies or whatever, or just people starting out into the game, don't really chase after boss gear like immediately. Some people say like, oh, it's like a waste of money to invest in anything else. I'm like, at the same time, there's people still using witch earrings. There's still people using Mark of Shadows, when clearly Tungrat earrings and crescents exist, but they're like 10 times more expensive. So, you know, just kind of do the math in your head and think about it a little bit. If you don't really want to, it'll give you an idea, just for sake of this video. So for instance, Mark of Shadow goes for 5.8 mil right now. Very, very cheap. Has the same base stats as pretty much a Crescent Ring. Crescent Ring is like 50 million for pretty much the same stats, but it's golden level. The only difference is that this scales obviously better than the Mark of Shadow, but it's also cheaper to go with a Mark of Shadow. If you can make it to a Tet Mark of Shadow, that is actually better than a Tri-Crescent Ring, and a Tri-Crescent Ring is actually very expensive to make these days. People pre-order for about 2 billion, which is insane. On different servers around the world, it's nowhere near as expensive, so I just look at it and it just seems dumb. But whatever, that's the marketplace of NA, unfortunately. So if you're on a server that isn't really crazy expensive, you might have better chances at making more upgraded endgame accessories. The other thing is that you also want to keep in mind, are you gearing up for the current meta or whatever? I don't really care for current metas or whatever. I always look into what's coming up next. What's coming up next is like Lieber's gloves, ring or Orkangrad's belt or whatever, like the Pupil of Shattered rings or whatever, and like a different, better version of Mark of Shadows and a better version of Crescent rings, which is even more expensive. There's Tungrad sets or whatever, you know, just things to kind of keep your head about if you're going for long term versus short term. If you're going for short term, just look up what current meta is. Everybody's running damage reduction, people running full AP. They don't really care much about anything else. Accuracy's kind of like out the window, evasion's out the window, because everybody's just gearing on top of renown score. The thing with like Lieber's gloves, when it comes later on with Dregan, that's when evasion sort of kind of takes over again, in my opinion, because one, there's going to be a hybrid belt that is much better stats and better balance, in my opinion, for that slot in your belt slot, because right now there's only the Basilisk belts, Tungrad belts, and Centaur belts. So basically that's either full AP or full DP, and you don't really have a hybrid balance kind of thing. And then Sissel necklace is like the only thing for defense in terms of necklace if you want the most out of it. Benchos is really all DP, but you lack like a lot of AP, so you gotta pick and choose. I just prefer that, you know, you try and obtain as many stats as you can without also like paying like an insane cost. The thing with boss gear also is that memory fragments are very tedious and tiresome to get. A lot of people claim the game is pay to win because of artisan memories, but that's probably because they just can't, they're not patient, or out of that they just want the best gear right away, and then they find out that they have soft cap gear and they still get vaporized in war and they say the game is shit. I don't really know. So, most of the time is you got to pick the right fight. If you just jump into 12 people alone thinking you're a god because you're at soft cap gear, you're going to be put in your place really quick. So like right now, obviously scrolls are insanely expensive. This used to be about 1.1 million about like a month or two ago, but because this game has turned into Shake My Head Online, this is now 2 million scrolls. 2 million. It's like crazy expensive. A memory fragment only goes for 750k. One of these scrolls is equivalent to about maybe 1.2 memory fragments. So at about 1.2, that's literally about 1.1 mil. So if you're going from 750k up to that, so it's close to 1 mil, 1.2 mil after tax sell or whatever. So that's why I would not buy scrolls, and also why I wouldn't just gear rush boss gear off the bat as a new player. One of the things I've suggested is obviously Lemoria gear. A lot of people shame on this thing for some reason. I don't know why. It's readily available. You don't need memory fragments to repair this. You can actually just buy another piece of this gear and just use that to repair it. It's still just as expensive as well. If you use artisan memories, you also get a lot more for your money's worth or whatever if you really want to go down the pay-to-win route. Otherwise, you can gain power fairly quick with this. The main thing I'm going to illustrate here is the difference between a Tree Spirit Armor, which is pretty much the best chest in game, versus a Lemoria chest piece right here. So the thing is, thing I want to illustrate here is that a Pry Armor here of Lemoria gear is 65 defense, 31 evasion, 93. I'm just going to wear this tree armor just so that the comparison will show up here, right? Just so I can illustrate what the hell I'm talking about. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that in terms of boss gear, like the difference between these two is really minimal. You're only losing 1 DP in stat. You're losing 3 hidden evasion, and the damage reduction is literally identical. And the only thing you're also missing is 200 HP in bonus. That's the only difference. The 200 HP won't really even matter to you that much early on. That really only adds up when you have a lot of other things involved, like crystals and whatever. And other people argue as like, oh, it only has 1 crystal slot. Well, the other thing is, as a new player, you're not really going to be making Djinn crystals for yourself right off the bat. And if you did, you're pretty RNG carried and you're pretty lucky. And then the other thing with like Red Nose Armor, the cheaper of the boss gears, Red Nose Armor is obviously the alternative to Tree Spirit Armor. But in terms of the difference in stats, like both all at Pry level, Lemoria gear is far cheaper. You only missing 1 slot, and between Red Nose and Lemoria, there's almost practically no difference, other than that Red Nose gives you HP recovery up, and that's so minimal, it's kind of negligible. Like this is practically irrelevant, because by the time the amount of damage you've taken and the time it takes for a HP recovery tick to kick in, you're probably dead. So really, there's not really a point to getting a Red Nose Armor unless you actually need to min-max your stat or whatever, and you can't obtain a Tree Armor, and everything else is slotted with like gold items. This is kind of like a last ditch effort. So the Pry Red Nose is 261 mil, but a Pry Lemoria Armor goes for like not even that amount of money. So that only goes for 81 mil. It's literally 1/3 of the cost. So you can save yourself 1/3 of the money. The only thing you're losing out is a crystal slot, and the only thing you're gonna slot in terms of chests, if you want to take PvP or anything seriously that far, is putting in Djinn crystals or bond crystals, and those generally go for about, if you're able to snipe it off the market, it's about 24 million. But the amount it takes to actually make it is closer to about 100 mil, 100 to 50 mil, and even then it's still RNG. So in terms of an average between the number of crystals that you're gonna proc by the time you get the one you want, which is Djinn. Djinn is generally the most rare one, and also generally offers the best stats for the PvP situations and PvE situations for most of the slots. That's gonna cost you about 100 to 200, possibly even up to 300 mil, depending on how lucky or unlucky you are. So that's just something to keep in mind. So obviously, if you make a Djinn crystal and you actually fit it into your Lemoria armor, great. You're 1 out of 2, and until you get the second one, I wouldn't really even care about the other armor. And I would use the Lemoria armor as actually like a backup piece in order to fill up, to also make fail stacks. The other thing is fail stacks is the next part. Fail stacks is a bit of a, some people find it a really dumb system, some people find it a very okay system. I consider it actually a pretty cakewalk system. It does get frustrating after a while, obviously, because I've done it so much, but then it's far better than like previous MMOs I played. Previous MMOs I played is more or less along the lines of here's your item, here's your upgrade chance, Throw it together, succeed, great, you get an upgrade. Fail, goodbye, everything. Literally everything goes goodbye. It's like accessory enhancing on here. So if you want to gear up probably faster, if you upgrade your armor and weapons and they fail quite often and you make it to high stacks or whatever, then you want to use those stacks on heavy accessories and pray that it goes through. Obviously, the chances are still a chance. It's not guaranteed, but you want the best chance you want for those, and those are the things that will cost you the most later. So don't worry if your armor isn't really getting up. If you upgrade accessories, consider it like an account upgrade, because every time you upgrade an accessory, you can toss it to any character across your whole account, and just I consider it like a account upgrade. Armor as well as a bit like an account upgrade depending on what kind of build you're trying to make. If you're going for evasion, evasion builds still do exist. It's just not really heavily favored due to the renowned score, but even with renowned score, if you just stack evasion, you get more damage reduction for stacking defense. So basically, you're just going to be even harder to kill. And then once you reach a certain threshold of evasion, some people will have a lot of trouble hitting you, which means not only do they hit you a lot less, which means a full negation of damage, they also do a lot less damage because you have so much evasion, it gives you damage reduction on top. So just, you know, different variations to think about. Currently, the only best piece of like evasion gear for the head slot is just actually like Helmet of Heave or Rocaba gloves and Rocaba helm combo, but that'll change when Dregan comes out, because Lieber's gloves gives like 3 times the evasion that Beg's gives and like half the amount of accuracy. The other thing with your main hand, a lot of people you probably do want an often Tet main hand eventually, but that eventually is literally very far. Zarka is generally a better best bet and also far more easily obtainable in terms of a main hand weapon. Rosar weapons are very good. They have 2 slots. They're a green weapon, very easy to upgrade, very easy to utilize. I don't know if you would really want to use a Liberto. I don't really even hear much about Libertos these days. Offhands, I really have no idea. I just use Kudum. I used to use an AP offhand, and then I just swapped over to Kudum, and I used Kudum for like 90% of everything, including PvP, just because of the amount of offered like different stats it gave. It prevented me from getting one-shotted. It helped me CC enemy players more often, helps me grind. And Nuver is more or less like when you're really geared, that's when you start getting a Nuver. And then by the time you reach at about like 270, I would say, or 275 or 280 AP, you probably want to switch your Zarka over to a often Tet for that 3 extra AP and the loss of accuracy. You lose about 12 or 18 accuracy, but that really doesn't matter, because by the time you're at 270 or 275 AP, all the bonus accuracy that you get from your accessories to reach that level will cover for the difference of accuracy that Zarka is going to lose versus a main hand often Tet. You also get +2 critical bonus and +2 attack speed or cast speed bonus inherently from the weapon itself compared to Zarka, which has no crit bonus. So it overall just increases your damage like even further up. But you have to reach that level for it to be effective, because otherwise if you lack too much accuracy, then you're going to lose out a lot of damage output in certain situations or against certain people. So a good range to kind of hover around, I would say, is 300 accuracy. Anything more is you're trying to take out an evasion build. Anything less, you're actually more damage focused and you're expecting to burst people, stuff like that. That's what I've seemed to have heard enough of from a lot of people. I really don't think like sacrificing like earring slots to red coral earrings is too good, because that AP loss is very big, especially in higher AP levels. When 5 AP could be the difference between like 20 extra damage or 40 extra damage in terms of scaling on your skills, and that's pretty massive for the price of just like 10 extra accuracy, which I don't think matters too much. If half your hits miss, but they hit like a rocket truck, then you know that's where the strength comes in, because people will either overheal or they'll get away, and then you actually couldn't kill them. It doesn't matter, and it also really depends on your class too. Some classes have inherent bonus accuracy and they don't really need it. Some classes don't and they actually need it, which kind of sucks, but they're actually a lot more bursty. So you still have to think about, like, you know, where do you want your class to be. Also experiment around. Don't really just focus like I wouldn't say like just get like 2 red coral earrings. Like if you actually do want to test it out, you know, take like 1 red coral earring and then like the second one go all AP. Then you can, somewhere down the road, you can decide whether or not I should get 2 red coral earrings or like I should just go full tongue grad earrings or whatnot or whatever. So you'll have at least some kind of variation there. A lot of people will just, I don't know, they'll either scoff at this idea or whatnot, but this is essentially what the system is presenting, is that everything adds towards your renown score. So large number stats is more important than secondary stats like accuracy and evasion. So AP, DP is far more valued than it is secondary stats. Alright guys, so that's a bit of a long video here. So just to summarize, don't rush for boss gear right away. You might want 1 or 2 pieces, preferably weapons for your class that you're interested in. I highly suggest getting a Kudum as soon as you can, when you can, simply for grinding and everything else related to Black Desert in general. It's highly versatile and you can use it almost everywhere. And Mainhand, generally go for a Zarka anyways, because even I'm not using an Offentet and nobody kills that boss anyways, so go after a Zarka until Offentet becomes available later. Don't really discount evasion builds right now, because somewhere down the road that's going to switch back into being everybody's going evasion again, because Lieber's gloves will come later. That means the Rocaba and the Rocaba gloves combination will be kind of diminished, because the Lieber's gloves is far more evasion than anything else in that slot. And it's also a boss piece gear, so, you know, just something to keep in mind about. In terms of the resistance or whatever that Gyfin has versus Gyfin, a lot of people have a lot of debate about this as well. Gyfin obviously gives 100 HP and Gyfin gives a slightly more damage reduction and bonus resistance. I would suggest Gyfin helmet if you're going in for large scale PvP and you don't really take on small scale fights. Mainly because resistance kind of doesn't matter when you're fighting about like 5 or 6, 7 people at a time, because the amount of CCs that's being rolled against you against your resistances is absolutely like pointless. You're gonna get CC'd at some point once you run out of super armor or whatever, or you V out. So HP at that point will help you more than resistance will. And for some reason, I don't know how CC really works anymore. It says it applies on the first hit, and then it's contradictory in the descriptions in the patch notes, saying like some skills proc it like 14,000 times or the entire attack, which makes no sense and is completely imbalanced. Kuno is actually one of them, like Tendon Cutter. Tendon Cutter literally procs stiffness on all the hits or whatever, which is pretty ridiculous on the good blade hits, which is still like half the animation of the attack. So, you know, they're not really clear about anything, which is really annoying still to this day and age, that how old this game is, and they still haven't been really clear on any of this. That's a very frustrating point on my end, trying to, you know, clarify that for people and players alike and myself. So it's just, if you've got about 20 fail stacks, you should use that on like a Pride golden accessory. If you got about 35, save that for dual accessories. At about 45 to 52 is for like tri-golden accessories, and then for like golden accessories Tet, anywhere from 87 to 100, and you're looking for pen 150 to like 160. Those are the numbers that I'm going to give out here, and that's mostly because of like research and also a lot of stupid digging from like a lot of different places and KR and whatever, and just reading a pattern. There's also been data leaks and whatever. It's just finally like there's some actual data on that stuff. The chances are somewhere between like 50 down to like 35 to 24, 12 and 6% or whatever, something like that. It's not very forgiving at the later levels, and that's what I'll leave you with. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. That concludes the new player Blitz chapters. Bye bye for now. I'll add another one if I feel there's something else that needs to be addressed in you know, collaboration of all your comments and feedbacks. But other than that, I'll see you later.